Hello, everyone. It's good to see you all here. I see Rugved, Kalpana, madam. I see Sankalp as well. I see Rishikesh Patil, Shakuntala ji, Rita, I think Pushpa. So, welcome everyone. Welcome to my live stream where I'll be reading two stories today. But then it's 7:59. We are 1 minute early. Just give me 1 or 2 minutes and then I'll be with you. We'll just wait for a few more people to join in and then we'll start. Okay, let's start now. So, for you today, I've got a very interesting story. This is one of my favorite stories. This is Baker Bob. So, I'll be reading two stories today. I have Baker Bob and I've got The Selfish Giant, both of which are for you. The Baker Bob is for the younger ones, and The Selfish Giant is for the elder ones. So, we'll start. But then, I first want to thank you for joining my live stream today. And I'm so glad. And I was missing all of you students. And I was hoping that we could have some time together. But then YouTube seemed to be the most perfect way where I could interact with you. Since Google Meet, we have a limitation of 100 students only. Here, more than 100 people can join in. So we'll be having these sessions every single day. For best audio quality, I suggest you wear a pair of good headphones so that you don't miss out on anything that I'm reading. Okay? So let's get on with the first story that I have for you today. It's called Baker Bob. I'll just pull my mic a little closer. Yeah. So this is Baker Bob. Bob goes to the bakery very early each day. He makes dough from flour, butter, eggs, sugar, and a pinch of salt and places it on trays. So Bob goes to the bakery. Bob is a baker. Bob goes to the bakery very early each day. He makes dough. आटा बनाता है using flour, butter, eggs, sugar, and a pinch of salt and places it on trays. So he makes a dough. आटा बना के ट्रे पे रखता है. Bob makes cookies and pastries and other tasty treats. But not everything Baker Bob makes is so sweet. So Bob makes a lot of things. Bob makes some salty things. Bob makes some sweet things, but not everything that he makes is sweet. He bakes the bread until it's brown and ready and removes it from the oven nice and steady. He doesn't want to drop it. He doesn't want to drop the freshly baked hot bread that's just got brown. So he doesn't want to drop it. So he removes it from the oven nice and steady. At 9, the shop opens and he's back on the job so that we can buy fresh baked goods from our friend Baker the Bob. From our friend Baker Bob. So this is Baker Bob. You want to go to that story again? Baker Bob? Let's go one more time. Bob goes to the bakery very early each day. He makes dough from flour, butter, eggs, sugar, and a pinch of salt and places it on trays. Bob makes cookies and pastries and other tasty treats, but not everything Baker Bob makes is so sweet. He bakes the bread until it's brown and ready and removes it from the oven nice and steady. At 9, the shop opens and he's back on the job so that you can buy fresh baked goods from our friend Baker Bob. So that was the story of Baker Bob, best suited for kindergarten and grades 1 to 3. Okay. Now I have another one for you, the one that I personally really like. It's called The Selfish Giant by Oscar Wilde. So I'll read this story and I'll explain it to you in some time as we read. Every afternoon, as they were coming from the school, the children used to go and play in the giant's garden. It was a lovely garden with soft green grass. Here and there, over the grass, stood beautiful flowers like stars. And there were 12 peach trees that in the springtime broke out into delicate blossoms of pink and pearl, and in the autumn bore rich fruit. The birds sat on the trees and sang so sweetly that the children used to stop their games in order to listen to them. "How happy we are here!" they cried to each other. See, the children are playing in the garden and they are really happy. This is the giant. One day, the giant came back. He had been to visit his friend, the Cornish ogre, and had stayed with him for 7 years. And after the 7 years were over, he had said all that he had to say, for his conversation was limited, and he determined to return to his own castle. When he arrived, he saw the children playing in the garden. "What are you doing here?" he cried in a very gruff voice, and the children ran away. "My own garden is my own garden," said the giant. "Anyone can understand that, and I will allow nobody to play in it but myself." So he built a huge wall around it and put up a notice board. He was a very selfish giant. So this is the giant's notice board over here. "Trespassers will be prosecuted," he says. The poor children had nowhere to play. They tried to play on the road, but the road was very dusty and full of hard stones, and they did not like it. They used to wander around the high wall when their lessons were over and talk about the beautiful garden inside and say in a very sad voice, "How happy we were there," they said to each other. Then the spring came, and all over the country there were little blossoms and little birds, but only in the garden of the selfish giant it was still winter. And the birds did not care to sing in it, as there were no children and the trees forgot to blossom. So there was spring across the entire country, but spring did not come to the giant's garden. Once a beautiful flower put its head out of the grass, but when it saw the notice board, it was so sorry for the children that it slipped back into the ground again and went off to sleep. The only people who were pleased were the snow and the frost. "Spring has forgotten this garden," they cried, "so we will live here all year round." The snow covered up the grass with her great white cloak, and the frost painted the trees silver. Then they invited the north wind to stay with them, and then he came. He was wrapped in furs, and he roared all about the garden and blew the chimney pots down. "This is a delightful spot," he said. "We must ask the hail on a visit." So the hail came. Every day for 3 hours he rattled on the roof of the castle till he broke most of the slates, and then he ran round and round as fast as he could. He was dressed in grey, and his breath was like ice. I cannot understand why the spring is so late in coming, said the selfish giant, as he sat at the window and looked out at his cold white garden. I hope there will be a change in the weather. So the selfish giant, wondering why spring has not come to his garden, was sitting looking all sad in his balcony. But the spring never came, nor the summer. The autumn gave golden fruit to every garden, but to the giant's garden she gave none. He is too selfish, she said. So it was always winter there, and the north wind and the hail and the frost and the snow danced about through the trees. One morning, the giant was laying awake in his bed when he heard some lovely music. It sounded so sweet to his ears that he thought it must be the king's musicians passing by. It was really only a little linnet. Linnet is a bird singing outside his window. But it was so long since he had heard a bird sing in the garden that it seemed to him to be the most beautiful music in the world. Then the hail stopped dancing over his head, and the north wind ceased roaring, and a delicious perfume came through him and came to him through the open casement. I believe the spring has come at last, said the giant, and he jumped out of bed and looked out. But what did he see? What did the giant see? He saw a most wonderful sight. Through a little hole in the wall, the children had crept in, and they were sitting in the branches of the trees. In every tree that he would see, there was a little child. And the trees were so glad to have the children back again that they had covered themselves in blossoms and were waving their arms gently above the children's heads. The birds were flying about and twittering with delight, and the flowers were looking up through the green grass and laughing. It was a lovely scene, but only in one corner it was still winter. It was the farthest corner of the garden, and in it was standing a little boy. He was so small that he could not reach up to the branches of the tree, and he was wandering all around it, crying bitterly. See, the boy over here is crying. The poor tree was still quite covered with frost and snow, and the north wind was blowing and roaring above it. Climb up, little boy, said the tree, and it bent its branches down as low as it could. But the boy was too tiny, and the giant's heart melted as he looked down. How selfish I have been, he said. Now I know why the spring would not come here. I will put that little boy on top of the tree, and then I will knock down the wall, and my garden shall be the children's playground for ever and ever. He was really very sorry for what he had done. So he crept downstairs and opened the front door quite softly and went out into the garden. But when the children saw him, they were so frightened that they all ran away, and the garden became winter again. Only the little boy did not run, for his eyes were so full of tears that he did not see the giant coming. And the giant stole up behind him and took him gently in his hand and put him up into the tree. And the tree broke at once into blossom, and the birds came and sang on it. And the little boy stretched out his arms and flung them around the giant's neck and kissed him. The little boy flung his arms around the giant's neck and kissed him. And the other children, when they saw that the giant was not wicked any longer, came running back, and with them came back the spring. It is your garden now, little children, said the giant, and he took a great axe and knocked down the wall. And when the people were going to market at 12 o'clock, they found the giant playing with the children in the most beautiful garden they had ever seen. All day long they played, and in the evening they came to the giant to bid him goodbye. "But where is your little champion?" he asked. "The boy I put into the tree?" The giant loved him the best because he had kissed him. "We don't know," answered the children. "He has gone away." See, the giant playing with all the other children. "You must tell him to be sure and come here tomorrow," said the giant. But the children said that they did not know where he lived and had never seen him before, and the giant felt very sad. Every afternoon, when school was over, the children came and played with the giant, but the little boy whom the giant loved was never seen again. The giant was very kind to all the children, yet he longed for his first little friend and often spoke of him. "How I would like to see him," he used to say. Years went over, and the giant grew very old and feeble, old and weak. He could not play about any more, so he sat in a huge armchair and watched the children at their games and admired his garden. "I have so many beautiful flowers," he said, "but the children are the most beautiful flowers of all." Now he had become old, so his voice was a little shivery. One winter morning, he looked out of his window as he was dressing. He did not hate the winter now, for he knew that it was merely the spring asleep and that the flowers were resting. Suddenly, he rubbed his eyes in wonder and looked and looked. It certainly was a marvelous sight. In the farthest corner of the garden was a tree quite covered with lovely white blossoms. Its branches were all golden, and silver fruit hung down from them, and underneath it stood the little boy he had loved. Downstairs ran the giant in great joy, and out in the garden he hasted across the grass and came near the child. And when he came close, his face grew red with anger, and he said, "Who hath dared to wound thee?" "Who has dared to wound you?" For on the palms of the child's hands were the prints of two nails, and the prints of two nails were on the little feet. "Who hath dared to wound thee?" cried the giant. "Tell me, and I may take my sword and slay him." "Nay," answered the child, "but these are the wounds of love." "Who art thou?" said the giant. "Who are you?" said the giant. And a strange awe fell on him, and he knelt before the little child. And the child smiled on the giant and said to him, "You let me play in your garden today, and you shall come with me to my garden, which is in paradise." And when the children ran in the afternoon, they found the giant lying dead under the tree, all covered with white blossoms. So this is the final picture of the boy and the giant. So that was the story of the selfish giant. The selfish giant was a big, big giant who had a wonderful big garden, very, very beautiful garden with lots of trees and lots of flowers and lots of grass in his garden. But then he did not want anyone else to share his garden with him. So he decided not to let anyone play in it. But something happened, and he started wondering about what he had done, and then he finally changed. He changed because of a boy who had given him something new to think about, who had given him something new to change his thought about. And then the giant changed, and then he let all the children play in the garden. And one final day, when it was his time to go, the giant went away peacefully with the little boy. So let me know what do you think about this story in the comments below. I would love to hear recommendations from you as to what stories would you like to listen. मैं जानना चाहूँगा कि आप मुझसे कैसी स्टोरीज सुनना चाहते हैं. मैं जानबूझकर ये सारी स्टोरीज इंग्लिश में रीड कर रहा हूँ क्योंकि मैं चाहता हूँ कि सारे बच्चे जो मेरे साथ आज वीडियो में लाइव हैं, अभी मेरे साथ 144 स्टूडेंट्स देख रहे हैं. तो 144 स्टूडेंट्स जो मेरे साथ लाइव हैं, वो सारे स्टूडेंट्स को इंग्लिश लैंग्वेज, इंग्लिश प्रोनाउंसिएशन और बेहतर इम्प्रूव किया जा सके उनके लैंग्वेज का, इसलिए मैं ये सारी स्टोरीज इंग्लिश में रीड कर रहा हूँ. बट देन मैं हिंदी में भी कुछ स्टोरीज बोलना ज़रूर पसंद करूँगा. सो लेट मी नो इन द कमेंट्स बिलो आप क्या चाहते हैं, एंड आई विल सी यू टुमारो. थैंक यू सो मच फॉर कमिंग.